Hello, and welcome to Embracing the Fight. I am Erica Lamar, your digital creator and host. And if you've been with me since January of 2023, you will know that Embracing the Fight is about normalizing the conversations surrounding physical and mental health issues and concerns. Now, why is this even important? Just imagine if that person that decided to go into that classroom and shoot teachers and children, if someone had stopped them and talked to them, what a difference it could have made. No one knows what a person goes through prior to them starting a crisis of some sort. We would know that if people felt free, if they felt safe to speak
Mm.
on these things. And that's why I created Embracing the Fight. Now, the other reason was a little bit more selfish in the fact that I had thyroid cancer.
Mhm.
And a lot of people will wonder, what's going on with my family, what's happening, with this person, that person. And people just don't speak on it because they think, one, maybe people don't care. Or two, they're like, this is really private. If I tell them this, they're going to start judging me and they're going to look at me differently. And I just wanted to dispel all of that by speaking first, because it's really hard to be the first one to speak about it in the room. So I chose me. And I'm glad that you all came to check out Embracing the Fight. Now, if you haven't subscribed, I need you to click like, click share, and subscribe to Embracing the Fight on YouTube. You can also find me on Facebook, Instagram, TikTok. The only difference is on Instagram, it's Embracing the Fight underscore. Now that I've gotten the business out of everything out of the way, you see that I have a very beautiful guest on screen. And her name is Bronwyn Schweigerdt. And I'm
Yes.
going to allow her a moment to introduce herself. And then after she introduces herself, I'll give her a second to say, kind of how we met. Because as you know, on Embrace and Fight, I either came in contact with them, in the real world, or someone introduced me to them, or, you know, I don't know, maybe Bronwyn can tell us how we met. So, Bronwyn, could you tell us a little bit about you and then a little about how we met?
Yeah. So I am a licensed psychotherapist and I am an anger expert. And so I started a podcast about almost 2.5 years ago,
Mhm.
all about anger. And then, now it encompasses shame as well, because those two are very closely entwined, turns out, and other emotions like hate that we never talk about because we don't have hate, right? Like
Oh.
we're not those kind of people. So yeah, kind of like what you're doing,
Mhm.
illuminating things that
Mhm.
tend to be kind of hidden, and just going there and being vulnerable, sharing my own story. A little bit about my own story. I wasn't looking to become a psychotherapist. This happened, I'm in my mid 50s, so this happened about 16 years ago. I myself fell into a very severe depressive episode and couldn't function at all. And so I went to a number of different therapists. And
Mhm.
every time I sat there on the couch going, Bronwyn, you are hardly functional right now, but I still think you would make a better therapist than this person. And so part of my healing journey from that depressive episode was actually going back to school and becoming a therapist, getting the 3,000 hours, all of that. So, but what I found out in retrospect, that depressive episode, I had another subsequent one a year or two later that was so heinous and lasted a very, very long time. Um, and as I started working as a therapist and I started connecting the dots between my depressive episodes, what I'm seeing in my clients with their depression, but also anxiety,
Mhm.
also panic attacks, also their mania or manic episodes, whatever, as well as their physical symptoms. So, insomnia, gut issues, headaches, um, you know, vertigo, the whole thing. I'm connecting these dots. You know what seems to be the common denominator is our suppressed anger, is when we disassociate. We don't allow ourselves to just go, you know what? It's okay to feel angry right now. It doesn't mean I'm going to be a loose cannon
Mhm.
and say something I later regret or end this relationship immediately. I'm just going to feel it. I'm just going to move towards it and go, okay, Bronwyn, where do you feel it? Right here in your chest? That's okay. Let's feel it.
Mhm.
And let's ask this anger what it needs from us. Does it need a boundary? Does
Right.
it need some assertive speech? Right. And
Mhm.
so in retrospect, I see with my own depression, if I had had the wherewithal to
Mhm.
do that for myself, I would have missed years. I would have escaped years of misery. And and then, just on top of that, I just want to say really briefly, I struggled with insomnia for 30 years.
Oh, wow.
And yeah, my entire adulthood basically until about 4 years ago. And I tried everything under the sun, as you can imagine. I was hospitalized at one point for it because I didn't sleep for 3 nights in a row at all. I couldn't function. Anyway,
Mhm.
when I started moving toward my anger and saying, you know what, it's okay to feel angry at my father. He is actually abusive. It's true. And allowing myself to recognize that and expressing that anger to him in, like, I would email him and say, you know, this is what you actually said. And I've never heard an apology. I've never heard ownership. I need that from you if we're going to continue this relationship. I need you to be a safe person because I don't feel safe in
Mhm.
your presence. So, starting to do that, that's when I started being able to sleep like a baby for the first time since I pretty much was a baby.
Mhm.
So, got off all my meds. And so what I'm trying to say is that health, physical, mental health, it so much of us lose that. We're robbed of it
Mhm.
because we're not connecting with our anger. And that's why I'm an anger expert. That's why I have my podcast called Angry at the Right Things, which really I want to help other people retake and reclaim their lives.
Okay. Wow. I mean, when I say you said a lot.
Yeah, I did.
Does now no, but I mean it's perfect because you had my wheels turning because it's like, okay, as we were kind of briefly talking, before we started here, I was mentioning that I had, claustrophobia. And it's like that is a form of mental illness that could possibly be because of some anger that I haven't, dealt
Yep.
with. And when you were saying it, I was sitting here going, no, why am I angry? Why am I so angry that when I get into a,
Yeah.
closed space, I literally want to have a full come apart. But it's not all closed spaces, not like elevators or
Mm,
closets or anything like that. Sometimes if I'm sitting on an airplane and there's a person next to me that's really big or really tall,
mm.
and like I feel like I can't get out and I feel trapped, oh, it's over. It's just like that. That's
Yeah.
right. Yeah. So,
Well, yeah. So little Erica,
mhm,
who lives in our bodies, not in our brain. Our brain is our adult self, our
mhm,
logical self, and we talk our body out of it. We say, no, we're fine. I'm not angry. It's fine. And
mhm,
then we disassociate. And so our inner child, if you will, our body is saying, hey, you need to protect me.
yep,
You need to pay attention to me. I'm not okay.
mhm,
And so that creates this schism within us. And that's the mental illness, that's the physical
wow,
illness. And so little Erica is trying to tell you there's something about feeling trapped that she experienced as a child, maybe kind of bullied, maybe kind of trapped, that she needs you to have some anger about and share her anger with her and be that protective mama bear for her.
hmm. The only thing that I think about feeling trapped in was my marriage. Like when I say I have the
Mm.
most supportive and loving and
Mm.
kind, parents, I never felt like there was anything that they didn't want me to do or they wouldn't protect me from. Like if I were to
Mhm.
come home from school and
Mhm.
say, some kids were mean to me or something like that, my parents were very, very supportive, but I was
Mhm.
usually the one being mean. They had to they had to talk to me and say, you can't do that because I didn't grow up in a neighborhood. I
Mhm.
grew up in a rural area in a sense. Everybody else was like in neighborhoods, but my parents had maybe 30, 50 acres, surrounding
Mm.
home. So we just lived in the middle of nowhere. And then
Mm.
when I got to school, it was like, okay, you're going to be my friend, not what do I have to do to be your friend? Like, you're my friend,
Mm.
And my mom was like, you can't do that. It's like you have
Mm.
to learn to play well with others, in other words. So, like I said, only because I can't think of any time, you know, when I was a
Well,
child.
it could be your marriage that
With,
maybe you
with
have some
divorce now.
right. But I bet there's some unprocessed anger still hanging out in your body and you're re-experiencing that when you feel trapped, metaphorically.
Yeah, that's true. So before we go any further, how did we meet or how did you come about being on Embracing the Fight?
Yeah, so I just have an agent. She finds me places to be interviewed that are good fits. So I can get this podcast out to more people. And I'm excited to be with you, Erica, because I'm not on many that are people of faith, on the whole. And,
Mhm.
I feel like sometimes therapy and psychology like that, at least growing up, that was like a different world than our spiritual journey. That was like for new age people or something. And the more I learn, the
Mhm.
more I see that truth is truth is truth. And it's all very much connected and it does set us free.
Okay. Well, thank you so much for being such a willing participant. And then, you know, we always do like a pre-talk, and this is just to the guest before we come on and actually do this show. And we decided on the calm before or after the storm. So can you tell us why we came up with that?
The calm, is it going to be before? You're not sure, or after the
I'm
storm?
thinking it's both because basically based off of what we just said, you know, it's like
Mm-hmm.
did the storm happen first
Mm.
or did the storm happen after, you know, the
Mm.
calm? Like when did the storm when did
Ah,
we realize that we had this issue?
right. Yeah, it seems like, for all appearances, it seems like this storm came out of nowhere, right?
Mhm.
But you're saying that it's true. The storm was there. It
Mhm.
was just kind of hidden away. That's a very good point. And we call that getting triggered, or we call it getting activated. And so maybe we should talk about that. So the calm, we can call it the calm before the storm, I guess. But we get triggered, and I like to say triggers are like landmines. You're walking out in a nice park and you're like, oh, this is so pretty. And all of a sudden, whoops, I stepped on a landmine. What happened? And I didn't see that coming. And I know I myself have experienced that where
Mhm.
I'm triggered. And all of a sudden, it's like I've lost myself because I am so angry. And when we are triggered, when we're activated, um, we don't really lose ourselves. We kind of go back
Mhm.
to our child or the first time we experienced that, right? So it doesn't have to be in our childhood. I think often it is because we didn't process a lot of things in our childhood.
Mhm.
um, but I'll give an example. So a few years ago, I was really triggered by my daughter and having a conversation with her.
Mhm.
I was trying to ask her questions about her day or something, and she kept saying, turning me down. Like she did not want to answer my questions, and it hurt my feelings. And I got angry, and we got into a big fight. And so, about an hour later, maybe two, when I calmed down and I'm by myself, and I sat in this chair by myself, and I just reflected, like,
Mhm.
what the heck just happened? Like, what was that all about? And I reflected on as much of the conversation as I could remember. And I started realizing, oh, that's my trigger.
Mhm.
And, we own our triggers. No one is responsible for our triggers. We are responsible for our triggers. And I realized my trigger is her not answering my questions because I can't handle silence in the presence of another person. And
Mhm.
I got that. I realized as a child, being with my parents in our home, it was so silent and that felt like rejection. And it was rejection. And I realized, oh, little Bronwyn felt so rejected by her daughter. Her daughter wasn't rejecting her. She just didn't feel like talking. And that's her prerogative.
Mhm.
But I couldn't handle that silence. That falls on me. And I need to work through this. And so that catalyzed for me really understanding and really working with my inner child, with little Bronwyn, and just being like, little Bronwyn, I know that you felt a lot of shame
Mhm.
living in a house where no one interacted with you, where no one asked you questions, where no one made eye contact with you for so long. Of course, you felt shame, and as children, because we don't have objectivity, we
Mhm.
naturally conclude it's a me problem. If mom and dad aren't paying enough attention to me, it's a me problem, right? We don't have the objectivity to say, well, they're really busy, or maybe my parents are depressed. A lot of parents are struggling themselves. We don't have objectivity to see it's actually a them problem, right? And
Mhm.
so that creates a lot of shame.
Okay.
And so that shame creates these triggers
Mhm.
in the present for us. Those are those landmines where all of a sudden we're like, what's going on? I'm so angry and I don't understand. And we're reacting in a way that is disproportionate to the present
Mhm.
because it's not based in the present. It's based in something much more painful
Mhm.
in the past, if that makes sense.
It does. I mean, that's very clear. So you're making me think back to something, that you were saying initially, how when you went in to do the counseling and everything, and you were laying on the sofa and you were sitting there saying to yourself, I would be a better counselor than
Mm,
these, people, mainly
mm,
because you had been through, the
mm,
issue or whatever crisis, all the different things that you had going on, you had been through it and you could see yourself going through it because one, you were able now to identify, your triggers. What if someone were to come to you now as an adult and they say, you know what, I deal with anxiety, but they think they've developed anxiety later in life and they're not connecting it, to anything that happened to
mm.
them, as a child? How would you help them to determine,
Yeah.
what the triggers are? Like, how do they figure it out? Because it's always going to be somebody else's problem as to why they're feeling, the way that they feel. Because anxiety is quite different. It's like, when you're dealing with anxiety, you're feeling like less than, and you're feeling like you don't need to be seen. You want to, and when you are seen, you're nervous about being seen because
Mhm,
of what people are thinking
mhm,
about you or what can happen to you when you're in a
mhm.
certain place. So how do you get someone who's dealing with something like that to
Yeah.
realize that the trigger is internal and it's something that probably started with childhood?
Well, it's yes, and it's both. So it's not just within them. So anxiety is suppressed anger. And so what I will say to my clients is, oh, you had a panic attack? That means you had an anger attack. So tell me what happened
Mhm.
right before your panic attack. And they'll tell me. And it's something where someone made them angry, but well, they didn't feel the anger. They
Mhm.
pretended it wasn't there, or they just weren't conscious of it. But oftentimes it is rooted in something. It's like they're re-experiencing something from their childhood in the moment and they're not aware of that. Um, so anger always needs another person. We
Mhm.
can't, and I don't like that how the Western medical model right now and therapeutic model, we say anger management and
Mhm.
we teach these skills like deep breathing, whatever, which aren't bad, but it looks at that one person like they're the problem. And I'm like, well, it takes two to have anger.
That's
So
right.
let's look at the relationship because it's not an intra personal problem, it's an inter personal. And if someone is an unsafe person,
Mhm.
then the solution isn't deep breathing. The solution would be a boundary with that unsafe person. So we need to recognize that. But in general, what's really easy to do. So I have my clients and I do this, for my podcast listeners. I'll say, let's just feel what our body was feeling in that moment. So if just kind of like I did, I reflected back a couple hours later on what the heck happened with my daughter.
Mhm.
So let's reflect back on what you felt, Erica, let's say when you were anxious, the last time you were anxious, right?
Mhm.
And I let you close your eyes and feel it in your body.
Mhm.
And let's say it's in your chest. Anxiety often shows up in the chest, right? And so I will ask you just to close your eyes and then as you focus on that sensation, let your mind float back to the earliest time you remember feeling that same sensation. And that will take us right back to what I call an imprinting memory. So it could be when you're 10 years old, it could be from your marriage, who knows? But it'll take us back to where this all began and why this dynamic is so triggering in the present.
Okay. So I can give you an example because I have a friend that came to me And they told me that they were dealing, with anxiety, and they explained, why it was a dream that came to them, and all the things that they were dreaming was, coming true.
Yeah.
And there were people that were losing their lives in these dreams. It was just crazy. And then the final dream showed them, and it was basically
Yeah.
like, okay, if you go this place or you do this thing, then you're next. So at that point, they started placing themselves in a box. Like they couldn't travel anywhere, they couldn't go anywhere or do anything outside of their normal space or the area that they know. If it was familiar, they could go anywhere outside of it. It's a no-go, for them. And it was odd to me because it's like, well, prior to you having this dream, you went everywhere you wanted to go. You did
Mhm.
everything that you wanted to do. Why is this dream able to hold you hostage like this?
Mhm.
Like, because how long ago did you have the dream? And it was like, oh, about 20 years. So I'm like, if it's been 20
Mhm.
years and you're not doing anything that was going on in the dream, where is this anxiety coming from? And they can't explain it, but they will literally be driving. And when
Mhm.
they get outside of an area that they know, they literally pull over, hyperventilating, vision
Mhm.
blurred, all of that. And they have to calm themselves down, turn around and go
Mhm.
back home.
Mhm.
What is that all about?
Yeah. So I always, the goal is to look for the wisdom in the dream or the wisdom in what your body is experiencing. Hyperventilation to me, I see, our chest and our lungs when we're having difficulty breathing as a feeling of hopelessness. I feel like when people feel hopeful, they kind of feel expansive in their lungs. Like they'll say, I can finally breathe. I can finally take a deep breath, and not having that is like a hopelessness. So there's some kind of hopelessness and anger. It sounds like feeling unsafe. But it's metaphorical. So it's not necessarily this exact territory, but there's something it represents, that a place where they feel safe, and then there's a place that they no longer feel safe. And so the wisdom would be, what's your body trying to tell you? What it's trying to keep you safe.
Mhm.
What are you angry at? What kind of anger did you have prior to this dream 20 years ago, that you stopped paying attention to, or something like that?
Okay. So as a friend, if this
Mhm.
person is telling me something like this, how do I help them, get out of it? Look, not necessarily get out of it because, it takes time, it takes therapy. But I
Mhm.
mean, as an understanding friend, what would be some things that I could speak to them,
Yeah.
say to them, hey,
Yeah. I would start with like seeing the wisdom and moving towards that instead of like blowing it off. But just being like, well, what do you think your body is angry at when you don't feel safe, or when did you not feel safe? In your childhood, like, was there a time where you felt really unsafe? Was there a time that you were really angry?
mhm,
And that, and really, I think at the heart of it, seeing anger as a blessing, because anger is like a light on the dashboard of our car saying, hey, check under the hood. Something's wrong. Pay attention. And the goal is to bring it to resolution. And so when we start to see our anger as a warning light that we need to pay attention to for our own good,
mhm,
then we're doing right by ourselves. And we're not, remember that schism that we create between ourselves when our adult logical brain says, don't worry about it, you're fine. But
mhm,
our body's like, I'm not fine. I don't feel safe. You're ignoring me. And so moving toward the anger and saying it's valid. Your anger is valid. Let's figure out what it's trying to say, what it needs from you in order to feel safe. When we do that, we're healing that rift with ourselves.
okay. And as a psychotherapist, when you have people come in and they tell you whatever it is they're dealing with, have you ever had anyone basically say, no, what you're talking about, that's not going to help me? And then at the end of the session, they actually, come into themselves and they're willing to go along with the process. Because the problem that we have is a lot of
Yeah.
people don't want to talk about their mental health, like I said, for fear of
Yeah.
judgment. So have you ever seen that type of transformation in any of your sessions?
I have, and I would say, especially with my older clients. So I'm in my mid 50s. If they're older than me, so in their 60s, plus,
Mhm.
yeah, they grew up in a generation. They're like, you can't be angry, especially if they're female,
Right.
and so that's not okay. And so, yeah, I'm thinking of one in particular who's almost 70, and I'm so proud of her. She has totally done a 180. She's able to validate her children's anger now. She wasn't able to do that before because she realizes her own anger is valid, and she has, really come into her own. And it's so beautiful. She's changing her next generation. And so, yeah. But I will say, when you say there's a fear of doing this because of judgment, now we're talking about shame. And we need to talk about shame because shame, so here's the thing, Erica. Babies come into the world with anger. We all know that if we've been around a baby for more than a minute.
Great.
Um, yeah, and you know what? When they're hungry, they're not like, "Hey,
Hey, I'm
I'm
hungry.
hungry." Nope. They're like, "Ah!" Yeah, they are angry. They're hangry, and when they're tired, they're angry tired, and so babies are born into the world with the full gamut of emotions. But one feeling they do not have when they enter this world is shame.
Right. It's a learn.
Shame is not a native feeling.
Right.
It's not native to humanity. It is, I call it the enemy of humanity because it debilitates us. All our emotions are there, like the word emotion, to move us in some way, to say, hey, you need to do this and to be safe, for goodness, for you and for others. But shame doesn't move us. It debilitates, it makes us stuck, and it will make us stuck in our own development, like what we call arrested development. We won't continue to mature.
Mhm.
And so shame is a liar. It says, you didn't just make a mistake, Erica, you are a mistake,
Right.
right? And that's a lie, because you know what humans do best? We make mistakes and we learn from our mistakes. And that is God given. And that's what we're created to do, is learn from them and have that humility and learn wisdom. But
Mhm.
shame says, no, no, no. You make a mistake means you're a mistake, right? Shame says you're all bad. It's
Mhm.
so extreme. It's so black and white, and it's a liar. And so, because of all that, shame exiles us from our very selves. It literally lives in the gut. So, I know on your past episodes, I've heard you interview a very popular episode. You interviewed someone who had colon cancer, and
Mhm.
that's very common, unfortunately. And I really believe so many of our colon disorders, including colon cancer, are linked with shame, because shame lives in the gut. And you know what else lives in the gut? Is our core self, like our inner child, like what we call our gut, our intuition.
Mhm.
And what shame does is it separates us from her. And so let me tell you just an example of how I kind of came by all this. So a few years ago, going back to, I shared with you earlier that I was able to finally feel my anger at my dad and move that towards boundaries with him, which
Mhm.
allowed me to sleep. Um, so about 4 years ago, I was going for a run one day. I was at a stoplight. I closed my eyes and I picture my 10-year-old self, 10-year-old Bronwyn, at
Mhm.
the dining room table where her dad would mock her every single night. He'd just make fun of me, humiliate me. And I pictured it, and I pictured my adult self entering that memory, going over to little Bronwyn, looking her in the eyes and saying, I know how much shame you feel, and I don't blame you. There's a lot of shame. But you know what we're going to do? We're going to put it all in this big cardboard box, and we're going to give it back to our dad right now. And we're going to say, hey, you know what? I thought this was mine, but I was wrong. This is yours, and I'm returning to owner. And I did that for myself just in my imagination. And
Mhm.
from that day on, it was like I was able to trust myself again and
Mhm.
trust my gut. And I felt like I had like come back to myself. I don't even know how to explain it.
Mhm.
And when I made a mistake, I didn't feel shame to the same extent at all that I used to. If someone seemed upset with me, I didn't feel afraid and ashamed. I was just like, let's hear it. Yeah, I made a mistake. So something shifted in me. And it's like I came back to life and I realized that was that shame that was killing me, that was robbing me of truth and of myself. And we can give it back, and we only have to do it in our imagination. And so that's an exercise I lead people on in my podcast. I lead them in just doing it for themselves, and it works.
Mhm. Wow, that I mean, you said so much there because I know people that have had colon cancer,
Mhm.
kind of like the lady that you speak of. Her name is Kat Nicole, and she actually just passed away recently
Oh,
from colon cancer. So she lost the fight but gained the victory.
yeah.
And I remember, talking with her, and she shared some things with me, and you could tell like her expression was downcast, but it wasn't because of the illness. It was because of things that were going on in her life. And we actually talked, about shame and anger and hurt and all that sort of thing. And she was saying that, at this point in her life, she just wanted to be free. And when you said that, I was just like, yeah, that's truly confirmation that your gut can hold all of that.
It does.
And it stress, anything like that turns into disease. And that's what I always wondered, was I carrying all of my shame in my thyroid? Because when I was married, I married quickly. I met him in March and I married him in October the same year. Because I was like, we're adults. We are, established. Both of us have been at our jobs for a really long time. We got homes, he had kids. I didn't have any kids. And I was like, everything
Oh, okay.
looks normal. And he's a really nice guy and all this stuff is working well. Then I married him. And it
Mhm.
went really fast. I mean, it was horrible, but I was so ashamed because I said, you know what? I didn't take the time to really get to know him, really vet him. And some of the things that he was saying and doing, it could potentially, affect my family. And I didn't
Mhm.
want them to be brought into my foolishness
Mhm.
because when he would get violent and angry, I couldn't call my parents up and say, hey, he's trying to attack me. I'm hiding in the closet. Because what do you think my parents going to do? They're going to come looking for him or send the police, or something like that. So
Mhm.
I
Yeah.
carried that, for a long time. And now that we're talking about it, I'm sitting here saying, now, when did I find out that I was claustrophobic? I was married. Prior to that, I didn't have that issue.
There you go.
And I was like, look at that. So
Mhm.
I said all that to say this. Your body, gives you clues when you have an illness, if it's caused, by something other than like the environment or eating, things of that nature. But when it's suppressed anger or suppressed
Yep.
shame, it shows up somewhere in your body. A lot of people will say they have a hard time losing weight. I know I'm one of those people because I like the way the food tastes. But at the same time, there are people out there that eat when they have different, triggers or things that
Mhm.
cause them to say, okay, this, instead of dealing with this, I'd rather, just feed myself and be happy with this piece of cake rather than disconnect myself from this person or this thing. So how
Mm.
would you encourage a person who
Yeah.
is dealing with shame to really, like how you're saying, sit down and really focus on what it is and separate themselves from it? Because a lot of people, when you say something like that, they'll sit there and go, I can think that all day, but I still live with this person. I'm still, around this person. How do I truly, disconnect from this person?
Oh, there's so much so many ways I could respond right now, but I do want to say, Erica, the first thing is, so it's interesting. I don't think you held shame in your thyroid.
Mhm.
You, so the thyroid, our throat, this area of our body gets sick, or we feel, it feels like tight or whatever when we're not speaking. And you couldn't speak. You couldn't tell people about your husband. So you held it in. And I think literally that is what happened. It affected your thyroid. I have a girlfriend who has major thyroid issues. And I say, you're keeping it all inside. You need to talk about it.
Yeah.
So I think that's what that was specifically. So not necessarily shame, but um, yeah, we need to talk about it. We need to, even if we can't, if you couldn't tell your parents, you could put your feelings into words, put your anger into words in a fantasy letter. You know, we
Mm-hmm.
can all do that. We can start there. We
Mm-hmm.
can start there and just heal ourselves, even if we're not making changes with that person in the immediate time.
Mm-hmm.
We can start with like documenting. So for me with my father, it was so healing to write out for myself, to document this and this and this. And then I like reread it and I'm like, wow, I wouldn't have put all those things together at one time unless I wrote them out. Like, I can't believe you said this and did this and said this and did this. And so my brain needed to see it all at once because my brain would only entertain one of those things at a time because I didn't want to see. We want to not see things about people. We want to turn a blind eye. But, you know, kind of with what you're alluding to, when we do that, we get sick. And if we're going to talk about, you know, scripture, it says, do not be yoked with it. It's translated, the word is often translated in English with an unbeliever, but that's actually not the best translation of that word. It's a untrustworthy person.
Oh, wow. Yeah. Yeah.
That's actually, if you go to the Greek, it is a person who is not trustworthy. And then that word trustworthy in the Greek, it means a lot of different things. It means stable, like
Mm-hmm.
a steadfast, consistent person.
Mm-hmm.
So when we're around people who are inconsistent, who are not stable, it creates chaos.
Mm-hmm.
And it's not, we have to contain that chaos. And sometimes we can contain the chaos with just being assertive and saying, you know what, that's not okay to say. And I need you to apologize and not repeat that. And that works for some people. And some people, now it's going to escalate and they're going to gaslight you and they're going to say, well, you made me say it because if you weren't blah, blah, blah.
Mm-hmm.
And that's not someone who is workable, right? So now we're going to the next level of a boundary. Okay,
Mm-hmm.
I don't think we can be together because this chaos is now affecting me. You're not open
Mm-hmm.
to listening. You're not open to owning
Mm-hmm.
that you're a human and you make mistakes. And I can't be in your presence because it's going to make me sick.
You know, it sounds like you know me. It sounds like you were there because
I think you had a very human experience that everyone else has at some time in their lives, right?
yeah, but the worst part about it was anytime that I would try to, bring things up or de-escalate, it seemed like it went way out the window. It's like I was trying to take the oxygen away from the fire, but apparently I put a fan and, brought some fresh O2 and just sprayed it all over it because it was like a massive fire, if I said anything. And then it would always be, well, I struggled, as a child. I had this happen to me and that happened and all that. But I was like, hey, but I didn't do it. I didn't do those things.
Yeah.
So it's like I would tell him, you need to go back and talk with the people that did those things, or go and see a therapist and say, hey, these
Yeah.
people did X, Y, Z. Why are you taking it out on me? Because I'm trying to
Yeah.
be nothing but kind, loving, a good.
Well,
So it's like, what am I getting the fire? What is this? What is this?
yeah. Yeah. People like, I mean, so people like that want to play victim. They always want to be the innocent victim of everyone else. And what they're not doing is saying, I'm a human and humans makes mistakes and I make mistakes and I need to own them and I need to learn from them and do better. And if they're not willing to do that, they are not a safe person to have in your life. But, kind of what they do, their weapon is shame. So they'll say, so they'll turn it onto you. They reverse victim and offender. That's what they do. They reverse victim and offender. So you say, hey, you know what? I don't really like what you said. That was really hurtful. And I don't think you needed to say it that way. And they'll make you the problem. Well, it's because of you. It's because of whatever. And that's the shame where they're trying to deflect their own shame onto you. And what we need is to feel angry because if we feel angry in that moment, we have it's like we get to have this force field, this invisible force field where their shame that
Mhm.
they're trying to offload onto us doesn't penetrate. It stays
Mhm.
outside our force field. And we're like, This is what actually, after I did the exercise for myself with my father, when I gave the shame back to him, maybe a year later, it was actually my pastor of the church I was going to.
Mhm.
He tried to shame the hell out of me. Oh yeah, he got fired and yeah, anyway, but I didn't know this about him, and the minute the door got closed, because we were having a meeting, just the two of us, which don't do that. The minute that door closed, he just tried, he like devalued me. He took all these things from the year and a half I had known him, and he just brought up everything and the kitchen sink. He interpreted them in ways to shame me. And I, in the past, my past self would have sat there and gone, "Oh wow, I would have found truth. I
Mhm.
would have found truth. I would have absorbed a lot of that shame, maybe not all of it, but I would have absorbed it." And this new Bronwyn that had her anger, who gave back that shame to her father, she had that impenetrable boundary. And I just sat there and I'm like, oh, I know what you're doing. I
Mhm.
see right through it. And this is all BS. It's
Mhm.
all BS. And I held him accountable. I met with the elders of the church. I told them everything. And yeah, anyway, so it was empowering, but we need to do that for ourselves, so we have that boundary where people can no longer shame us and we see through what they're doing.
And this is the first time I've ever had a conversation with someone that makes me feel and know that being angry or having anger is okay. Because one, it allows you to release, if you need to yell to get it out, but then it also puts up that invisible force field that you're saying, because whatever they're spewing, it's not penetrating, it's not getting in, it's staying over there, with them. And see, I was always one of these people that never, I don't argue. I'm not one of those kind of people now. I got a friend that says that I do, but just because I don't agree with what they're saying, I'm not sitting there screaming and yelling with them. That's what
Yeah,
I consider,
right.
argument. I just say, hey, this is a discussion. I'm giving
Yeah,
you my
yeah.
viewpoint, you're giving me yours. And see, I've never been a person to yell or anything because I was like, well, what's the point of that? But now I'm hearing that if it requires that, why hold it in? Because that can affect me. And
Mm.
I'm seeing, just by this conversation, that a lot of it has affected me. And I wasn't even thinking of it that way because I'm like, you know what? All of that's over. I've, been divorced now 7 years. So the thyroid cancer, actually, we found it back in 2022. But the doctor that found it told me that I think it grows less
Mhm,
than a millimeter or 2 millimeters a year or something like that.
mhm.
It was between 6 and 9 centimeters by the time they found it.
Wow.
So if it grows teeny tiny, that means it started growing when I was
Mhm,
married.
mhm,
And nobody found it until after I was divorced. And I wasn't having any pain, any issues, or anything other than the fact that I couldn't lose weight.
mhm,
So it just you're making me see so much
mhm,
that I was, just going on about my day thinking about, oh, this happens, that happens, whatever, you just let it go. Don't be angry. Just keep moving. Just do what you gotta do because you're out of that situation. But now what you're telling me is that it is okay to be angry, it's okay to release it, but
mhm.
don't impress that anger like onto someone else if it's a personal trigger.
Well, yeah. So let's define being angry. So being angry is just having that boundary. So
Mhm.
that's what my anger did. Afterwards, with this pastor, my anger is what I channeled it out of my body by writing a letter holding him accountable to the elders. That was, I didn't scream, I didn't yell, I didn't even raise my voice, and I met with elders. All of that was catalyzed by my anger. That was my anger flowing through me, making these things happen. So, anger, we usually associate with yelling and screaming, but we need to stop that
Mhm.
because it doesn't need to be that. It can just be being assertive and saying, you know what, that's not okay.
Mhm. Okay. So that's another thing. When people think of anger, they don't consider that being or really having anything to do with a response, to something that is bothering you mentally, like say for instance, anxiety, depression, I don't know, any mental disorder
Mhm.
or any mental issue that a person may have, they usually don't associate it with anger.
No.
So how did you make the connection between the 2?
You go back to when it started. I'll ask my clients, like, well, when did the anxiety start?
Hmm.
Okay, like 2 weeks ago. What happened about 2 weeks ago? If
Hmm.
if they said, I didn't sleep very well that night on Tuesday night, I'll say, what happened Tuesday day?
Hmm.
So right before whatever the symptom was. So pay attention. We need to not see things as random. We need to connect dots, connect our physical dots, what happens in our body, what we're feeling with things that happen with people, because it's all relational and
Hmm.
our body will hold it in physically, mentally, emotionally.
Okay. So on the flip side of that, say for instance, you've had people that have come to you that admit that they've considered suicide.
Mm-hmm.
Does that also stem from anger, or does it
Mm-hmm.
stem from shame? Or because the question that a lot of people have is when their loved one does succeed and they sit there and they say, I wish I had seen the signs, but maybe there were no signs,
Mm-hmm.
that a person could physically say, okay, well, on this day, I know they got in a fight, this happened, that happened.
Yeah.
What happens, what should you really be looking for when you find that a person is considering, taking their life? Or can you I'm really trying to figure out how to ask this because I'm thinking about people that I know that have had spouses or children that committed suicide and they blame themselves afterward because they're like, I didn't pay enough attention. But it's
Mm-hmm.
like, what do you pay attention to? What do you look at to where something goes off in your head that says, hey, they may be considering, suicide. So
Mm-hmm.
what do you
Yeah. Well, I'm going to go back to what you said at the very beginning when you introduced the show. You
Mhm.
said something about what if that person who was like a shooter,
Mhm.
um, before they shot, they listened. No, you talked to them before they did that thing that where they killed people, right?
Right.
And I wanted to say, no, not talk to them, listened to them, because that's so going back to my experience when I couldn't find the good therapist, so I had to become the good therapist. There just aren't enough people who listen. Even therapists aren't necessarily good listeners.
Mhm.
And I'm sad to say that. Um, we need to listen. So it's not about looking for signs,
Right.
it's about becoming a listener. So with our partners, with our friends, with our family, with our children,
Mhm.
we just listen, and we show that we care and that we want to listen.
Okay.
um and the more we do that, people will talk, their words will tell us, but when I was going through my own depression,
Mhm.
I mean, I look back, no one was listening, not
Mhm.
the therapist, not very well, um not the people at church, and I was desperate to be heard.
Mhm.
And so I kind of had to do that for myself. I had to figure it out.
Mhm.
But yeah, we just too much of this. So again, scripture says, be quick to listen, slow to speak, and slow to anger. It doesn't say don't be angry, but slow.
Mhm.
We need to be better listeners.
Okay. So say for instance, if we become better listeners and we hear everything and we figure out, okay, this person is considering harming themselves, how do you then convince them that, okay, I don't have the answers for you, but I love you and I care for you.
Okay.
Let's
No,
go
no,
to
no.
mental health therapy. What do
They,
you do?
we listen with the goal of understanding.
Okay.
That is what is therapeutic.
Hmm.
Helping us understand and helping them understand themselves, because human beings think out loud. We don't do much thinking on our own. We need another person called a listener, a good listener, to listen. And then as we talk, so you're going to hear someone, let's say who they are struggling with suicide. You're going to hear the anger, and
Hmm.
you're going to maybe have to say, "Oh, it sounds like you're really angry at that bully."
Hmm.
And maybe you're going to need to name it for them. And maybe that's giving them permission to feel their anger at the bully. It's there, but they're not connecting with it yet. So maybe your goal as a listener is to say, are you kidding? That's what this person says to you? Oh
Mhm.
my God, I can't believe that. That makes me angry. And now you're giving them permission because you're caring, you're
Mhm.
showing up, you're feeling with them what they need to be feeling. And so they're going to start going, okay, yeah, I am angry. And the more they're able to connect with their anger and feel it, and then, ultimately understand it and then know what to do with it, they're not going to want to kill themselves anymore. Because, yes, suicide is absolutely anger. It's anger at someone in our lives, and it's often anger at ourselves. And we need to understand it in order to unpack it and, dislodge it.
Okay. So if you were to give someone, advice, say they've come to you and they told you, oh, I know, say they haven't heard any of this conversation that we've had now, to know that, oh, I should really listen and really focus, on what they're saying and encourage them as, they share whatever it is they're sharing. They say to you, I want to direct them to a mental, health therapist or a psychotherapist. How would you go about, doing that when this person is being vulnerable? Or do you just not do it in that moment? Like when is the
I
right?
wouldn't do it at all. I would just listen to them and I'd be like, so if I'm their friend,
Mhm.
I'm just going to be a better listener. Honestly, Erica, I think a lot of us don't trust ourselves to be a good listener and to really allow ourselves to show up for other people. And so we redirect them to a therapist when maybe we should just be a good friend. And maybe that's really all they need. I mean, honest to God, that was all I needed. And I didn't have that. So let's just start by doing that ourselves. We don't need to be some expert. We
Mhm.
just need to feel our feelings and give them permission to feel their feelings in our presence. And we can validate their feelings. We don't give advice. We don't give advice. We validate. We say, you know, maybe I haven't experienced what you're experiencing, but
Mhm.
I get it. I mean, it makes sense why you feel that way. That's all they need to hear.
Mhm. And it's interesting, that you said it like that, because I always, say on here that I have a great support system, because my support system is what you described. So whenever I go to my friends, they never, if I say, what, I'm thinking about going and kill this person, just for pure anger. But I would never say that now. I'm just saying, say if I were to call one of my friends up, they'd be like, well, girl, what did they do? And
That's
once
awesome.
I start explaining it, they'll probably be like, do I need to get my boots, and a bucket, or what do I need? Bleach,
Mhm.
do I need to
That's
break up? So those are the kinds of friends that I have. So
oh
I
wow.
I just need to talk to them more rather than sitting here saying, what, I absolutely need to go to therapy. But that's what really got me through, a lot of it. Even though I couldn't like tell my
Mm,
parents, I could tell my best friend in
yeah.
and not, be judged at all and never hear about it again. Now
Yeah.
that's the piece for me, because a lot of people bring up stuff, oh, well, I remember when you were dealing with such and such and this is what you did. And it's like, I didn't tell you that for you to,
No.
throw it back up. Yeah.
That's not a safe person. That is not a safe person. So you're right. A good friend, and I don't have a therapist now. I have a best friend, and she's my go-to, and she's better than any therapist I've ever had. It's not that she knows, what to do. What she does is she listens, she validates me, she understands me. She'll
Mhm.
remember things I said the week before and be like, oh, what you're saying now reminds me of what you said before. I'm like, oh my God, you remember. Like, it's so therapeutic. You know what it is? It's love. It's
Yeah.
love. That's what love is. Love is listening. Love is showing up. Love is, trusting that person and being a trustworthy person. So that's what heals. And
Okay.
we need to do that for ourselves too.
Mhm. That sounds like that trend that was going around, on social media. We listen and we don't judge. Like they
Yeah,
could say whatever they wanted to say and didn't have to worry about, consequence coming behind it. And that I mean just what you described, that worked so well, just for
works so
me
well.
in general. So I'm curious to know, can you tell us more, about your podcast?
Yes. So it is called Angry at the Right Things.
Okay.
And it's found wherever you subscribe to your podcast. I do have a YouTube
Mhm.
channel as well. So yeah, it covers all of this. And then some of it, like I said, is experiences where I lead listeners through through self-forgiveness. That's a big one where we need to forgive ourselves. And then through, dislodging shame, and then moving toward integrating with our inner child. And just the stuff I've discovered, I want everyone to have access to it. That's my desire.
Okay. And do you have guests that come on, or do you just,
I've only had one guest that didn't go great, but yeah, right now they're just my own thoughts that I have about all kinds of different things. But I might have guests at some point. I don't know.
I think and this is just me speaking out loud, how you described your best friend. I bet if you guys were to do some episodes, it would be amazing. Be
We
magic.
have done a lot, but the hardest thing is when I do the episode with her, then I don't get to just talk to her. I'm like, I miss you. Like I want to just, so yeah. But I have done quite a few with her. Her name's Katie. She's on it too.
Hi, Katie. All right. Is there any other advice or any other information that you want to share that can help a person realize that there is a calm either before or after the storm?
You know what? I would just say in general, life is too short to betray ourselves. It's time to reclaim our lives and be fully alive and feel all our feelings, including our anger. And when we learn to be true to ourselves, that is not selfish. Because just like when a tree flourishes, it provides habitat
Mhm.
and refuge and food and safety for thousands of creatures. And so when a human being flourishes, we make the world a safer, better place. And so when we are true to ourselves, it changes everything.
Well, I appreciate you sharing all of this wonderful knowledge and all this wonderful information. Is there anything else that you would like to share? Any person that you would like to say hi to or thanks to?
No, I know. Thank you for having me, though. I've really enjoyed this conversation, Erica.
Same here. And thank you, for being such an open and willing participant in this space because when I say it's very, very hard to reach people when it's concerning, mental health because they don't want people to know that they're dealing with certain things.
No.
I'm just grateful for you doing that. And to everyone who's taken the time out of their day to watch this episode of Embracing the Fight, I just want to say thank you. And if you're dealing with what you perceive to be something other than anger, let's listen to what Bronwyn had to say today. Let's look at the root, look at where it started, and go from there. All right. And as always, I want you all to have an absolutely amazing day.